I thought about this, and I thought the kind of the craziest thing that most people don't know about me is the way back when I was in high school, I was a card-carrying Boy Scout. And the reason I was, yes, was because my father was in the military. We moved around, and I was actually going to school, high school in Korea, and they did not have enough girls that were interested in Girl Scouts. So they allowed me to join the Explorer group, and I literally carried around a Boy Scouts of America card carrying Boy Scout right here.
That is awesome. I love that fun fact. That is wonderful. And Lieutenant Governor Evett, we have you with us this morning. I do not see you. I think your camera may be off, so I'm not sure if there's a way to turn that on. But we'd love to see your face and hear from you something we may not know.
Let me see. Well, guys, I'm actually trying. I'm traveling back from DC, so I've never had to work this with. I can see everybody and my camera's on, but I'm not really sure why it is not showing me. But fun fact about me is I live with my mother. My mother has lived with us and our family since pretty much my father has passed away. And it was something that I treasure is that my grandmother lived with us growing up. And so it's really nice having 3 generations in one house. My mother was actually a first generation American, so it's great to hear all the time, like it was for my grandmother, stories of where we came from in Poland and great traditions that we carry. Like the doctor, I am a huge Christmas fanatic, and so have 6 trees up in the house, and we carry a lot of our Polish traditions through the holidays with us.
That is wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. And I know this year, I think family has really been emphasized for all of us, the importance of it and just how precious our time is. So I'm grateful again to get to know a little bit more about each of you. And we're going to hop into these questions because I know everybody hopping on here, your time may be limited today. So we want to get to as much as we can. If you have joined us, just one more reminder in the last couple minutes, if you've hopped on here, if you will mute your microphone and then if you can turn off your camera so that we'll just see our panelists here, that would be a huge help so that we can have everyone up here on that main screen as we're participating. All right. Again, lots of good questions at the end too. Also, as you're listening and those who are participating with us, if you're thinking of something, hey, I really want to ask this question, keep in mind we'll have that Q&A at the end. So jot that question down and then we'll put it in the chat because I want to get those questions answered as well. One of the first questions I want to start with is we know that this pandemic has changed a lot of things. And I want to know particularly from each of you how COVID has changed how you work specifically and how the pandemic will now affect and change your work moving forward. Lisa, do you want to start with this question for us?
Well, I'm happy to. Amazing. The COVID, once in a lifetime, hopefully. None of us have ever experienced this before. And as we work, one of the things that was really a change, and it was probably the greatest challenge as well, is that because we were dealing with something that was unprecedented before, every single decision had to be very deliberate. We had to anticipate, how did that affect all of our employees? How does it affect ourselves? And as the leader of such a large site, we have about 2,300 people here, it was very important for us to make sure that we were trying to take into consideration in every single decision, what is that going to do to each employee? What is it going to do to the business? What is it going to do to our customers, our processes? And the number one goal, of course, was to keep everybody safe. So as we started to go through, and I don't know how many of you remember just the volatility of protocol. Do we wear masks? Do we not wear masks? Is it okay if you social distance for up to 15 minutes in one room or something along those lines? And every single decision needed to be carefully thought through. What were the ramifications of those? So I think that kind of to wrap it up, the greatest impact not only on myself, but on every person who was in the decision-making process, had to think through. It's amazing because as you remain in industry or in a particular field, I'm sure, for long enough, things become a little bit consistent. If this, then that. And in this particular instance, it was very, very deliberate. Everything had to be very deliberate. I will say as well that when we talk about our employees, there are so many things that we have asked of them. When we talk about, and what I'm talking about are the people who actually make our products. When we speak of our leadership team, we asked of our leadership team so much. We actually, between the beginning of April and the beginning of July, made 81,000 phone calls to our employees, checking on them on a daily basis, because it is so important that we recognize that we're social beings. And it was important for us to maintain very, very good contact. So that was a lot of work. Even though we weren't necessarily producing tires, we were still working tirelessly. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, man. And that people overproduction, I think, has been stressed in 2020 more than any other year. I think it's incredible you took that lead on that, because I think people started to get lost in all of this. We were all of a sudden isolate, and then it was really easy for people to feel like they were on their own in all of this. And that's incredible. 81,000 phone calls. That's a lot. But I know it's just indicative of the time and space that we're in. Dr. Artis, do you want to take this one next? I'm sure it was very similar. I saw you on the national networks even talking about the efforts to check on students there at Benedict College. What's that process been like for all of you?
All encompassing, quite frankly. As you might imagine, Benedict is largely a residential campus. So typically 86% of our students live on the campus. And so for us to suddenly have the campus closed and have those students shuttled out to their respective home environments was really challenging for the college. And more importantly, being able to maintain contact with those students in the midst of COVID-19 was a full-time job for a lot of our staff and faculty. We did quite a bit of outreach in terms of these kinds of meetings, Zoom and GoToMeeting and Meet Me conversations teams with our students and with our parents to sort of stay in touch and provide information. I don't think you can over communicate during a crisis. It's important that repetition and consistency and answering questions and helping give voice to people's concerns is really, really important for us during this time. So we used social media, we used platforms like this, we used email, and of course those all important phone calls that were just referred to let people know that you care about them and you're thinking about them really was a big deal for us throughout the summer. And then as we welcomed them back in the fall, we really saw the net effect of that. Students understood that we cared very deeply for them and that we were very concerned for their well-being, particularly as the summer kind of heated up and we saw sort of the racial tensions flare and superimpose on top of COVID-19. It was so critically important to stay in contact with these kids. And as we come up on the holidays now, we know their emotional well-being is also a challenge for a number of students who don't come from families that you and I may be more accustomed to. Being able to stay in touch with them over Christmas is sort of our next rollout communication plan to let them know again that we're thinking of them, caring for them, and looking forward to seeing them in January.
And may I ask too, I mean, because so much of this is case by case, day by day, with decision making on the level that you're having to make decisions there at the college as far as safety, health, what's in the best interest of the students who may not have anywhere else to go but live on the campus. How do you all go about that decision-making process to try to factor in all of the different elements that may be impacting each individual student's life?
Lots of data points for us. We do tend to pride ourselves on being data-driven decision makers with hearts. And so for us, the initial conversation is, can our kids get home? And so we assisted and supported them, subsidized their travel to get home. The next decision was who has access to technology. We deployed laptops and hotspots, and unfortunately recognized that 12% of my kids live in areas, particularly of South Carolina, that do not have access to broadband. And so we had to figure out what the workaround looked like for those kids. We then conducted an assessment of the home environments of our kids. 31% of Benedict College students are housing insecure. That doesn't necessarily mean they're homeless sleeping on the street. It means that they're crashing with a relative or friend. They're on a couch, on a floor. They have no place of their own. They have no place to call home. They're inside a house, but it's not a home. And so as we began to understand the depth and breadth of those challenges, food insecurity, housing insecurity, et cetera, we began to try to facilitate those needs through the provision of financial support, quite frankly, that was funded through our CARES Act dollars. And again, the online learning brought some new challenges. Kids who were dyslexic, how do we tutor and support them? How do we engage students who may not learn well in an online environment? How do we understand learning styles better? Lots of that kind of work. And then, as I alluded to earlier, emotional well-being. And given the trauma associated with COVID-19, the immediate displacement from campus, which many refer to as home, the exacerbation we experienced in the long, hot summer post George Floyd, and then, of course, health concerns. 13 of our students were diagnosed with COVID-19 at home. All of those things really fed into our decision to reopen the campus in August in as safe a manner as possible. And just super pleased and proud of my team. We finished the semester with a 1.4% infection rate, which I think is just Herculean under the circumstances. So I think we did our best to protect our babies.
It really is incredible, Dr. Artis. I'd love to turn now to Lieutenant Governor Evatt. We can see you now, which is wonderful. I'm glad we've got you on the picture here. And of course, we're talking about processing this pandemic and leadership from all levels. So I cannot imagine what it's been like on the state level to truly have to realize and process and then execute when it comes to all of the decisions that have to be made in such unprecedented times. So Lieutenant Governor Evatt, I know we started kind of with that question, how the pandemic has changed how you work, but I would also love your insight into how you all have had to process making these decisions on that state level.
Well, thank you so much. And it has been quite a year. When you're looking at this from a state level, the governor likes to call it the three legs of the stool, right? You have to balance fiscal health, physical health, and mental health. And putting all those things together, when the pandemic first started, we were worried about schools. Well, there were a lot of things you have to take into consideration, as Doctor knows. A lot of the children in South Carolina, a very large percentage, the only meals they get come from school. So it wasn't so easy just to flip a switch and close schools. We had to figure out how were we going to feed those children. And I'm so very proud of what we did here in South Carolina. We used our school buses and our school bus drivers. We delivered meals, 2 meals a day, making sure all the children in South Carolina ate. And we didn't say, oh, if you received meals at school, somehow tell us that. We fed anybody who came to a school bus. We knew that some families that may not have needed this help would need this help now. And so that's what we did. We were very concerned about our businesses. Adding a catastrophe that we see in some states where they were so heavily shut down would just exacerbate this problem once we tried to reopen up. So I felt the governor, I'm so very proud to lead with him. He was poised and targeted. He made sure that what he shut down, he just paused. We paused for our hospital systems, really, to make sure that we didn't overrun them, that they would give them time to actually figure out the best way to treat the people of South Carolina. And then we opened it up. And so, we had to look at things from all different levels. We're very concerned about mental health right now. We're worried about what effects that happen. We were worried about children. 60% of reported child abuse is done by teachers. What people don't realize, and that's why the governor has been so vocal about getting children back 5 days face-to-face with their teacher, if at all possible. He asked for every district to have 2 ways of delivering education now, a virtual option. So if you had somebody at home that was immune compromised, or a child who was immune compromised, they would have that. But if they didn't, we needed to get our kids back in school. Abuse is one reason. Home is not always the safest place for a child. It's hard for most of us to understand that, but it's not. We also know Superintendent of Anderson District 5 sat with us and the Vice President. We talked about long-term effects of not having children in a classroom in front of a teacher, something we're all very concerned about, and it keeps me up at night, not just because I'm Lieutenant Governor of this great state, but because I'm a mother of 3, is that 2 years of interrupted education, we will start to see the highest dropout rates that our nation has ever seen. Which is why it's so important. The governor had a great press conference this week talking about PPE, and we have an abundance of it to give to school districts who have not opened up the way we were hoping they would. And we are here to partner with them to make sure our children get back in the classroom.
Again, so much to process. So I just want to start by thanking the 3 of you, because the roles that you're in are touching such critical aspects, obviously, of so many different important parts of our state that goes on to touch so much more than that. And this year's topic, of course, for this panel is Lean In, Lean On, Women Leading Through Turbulent Times. And just to be able to pick your brains and to hear from you in these turbulent times and what it's been like. I appreciate you being open and transparent about it, but also willing to share, as I think all of us are processing this on different levels. So that being said, and each of you sharing in different spaces here, I think that we know that it's changed so many things, especially what life looks like right now. But the question a lot of us have is, will life ever operate the way that it did before this pandemic, right? Will we see things go back, or have we kind of hit a point where things will hybrid into a new way of doing things, taking into account what's happened in 2020? So I'd love to hear from all of you, specifically just, do you think we will adjust from here and adapt in the workplace? Do you think we will go back to some things? I know this is a very general and broad question, but from the seats that you're sitting in, what does that future look like for you? And Dr. Artis, if you want to start this question for us.
Well, sure. The short answer is no. Nothing will ever go back to the way that it was pre-COVID-19. We are in the Garden of Eden and we don't have any clothes on. Like, we just realized that. And so I think it's going to be a variant on what we have seen before. I think we've all been grounded. I think God doesn't make mistakes. I think our foci have changed to some extent. On a more practical level, here at Benedict, for example, we began to use embedded open source materials instead of textbooks. We knew our kids didn't have them wherever they were. We will never go back. We now have embraced technology in a very holistic way, and we find that these open source materials are so much more engaging, so much more palatable to our students. Why do we go back to typical hard copy textbooks? And so there have been some natural evolutions that I think have been for the better, despite the trials and tribulations of COVID-19. I don't know that I want to go back. I think we're going to embrace the new normal.
Well, how about you, Lieutenant Governor Abbott? Do you what will things look like moving forward from here?
Well, I agree. I think we are not going to go back to where we were. And I think I've heard from businesses that they found lots of efficiencies. A lot of business owners were very skeptical about like a work at home. And now they're seeing that their bottom lines are prospering for that. And I think that we'll see a hybrid. I don't think it'll be like it is now for some industries, because let's face it, we are creatures that like to interact with other people. And I think it's been the one downside that I touched upon on the last question, is that mental health. We like to be around people. I think we'll see more of maybe like rotating days where you maybe work at home some days and work in the office some days. For children, I hope for the most part we go back. I think, as the doctor said, we have, I think there are things that we're forced into, like electronic books and things like that, or maybe more efficient and maybe more cost effective. I have one about to go back to get her law degree. And I remember the price of those books, you know, when you buy them as opposed to when you sell them back, right? So how nice would it be to do a download on that stuff? So I think some things will move forward, but I think children really need to be with their peers. I think it's how we develop interaction. It's how we, develop those skills going forward that make us empathetic people and that make us good workers in the workforce, right? Knowing how to problem solve in a room with people. So I hope when it comes to our K through 12 education that we really we go back to what we had. But when it comes to work, I think we're going to see a much different environment. And I think in government, our great Kevin Swato, that is part of DMV, they've come up with all kinds of ways, kind of making us move forward a little bit so we can do things online that maybe we couldn't do before.
And that is what has been so amazing out of this, is people had to pivot so quickly that I think it did kind of force us into how can we figure out a new way to do something that we've done one way maybe for so long, to kind of fill in the in between. And now I think we are in that space of starting to look at, okay, how do we make this better for the long haul from here? And what does that look like? And so, Lisa, I'd love for you to tackle this too, just because I know there are some things we can do from home. We can't manufacture tires from home. So
We cannot.
What does that look like?
We've offered to let people take machines home with them and do that, but it's not going to work. So yeah, I think that when it comes to, are we ever going to go back to where we were? I agree with the other two. No, I don't think we will. However, I tend to disagree that this is the new normal. I think that we are continuing to evolve. I think we're continuing to figure it out. But to what the Lieutenant Governor said, we are social beings, and we need to have that kind of interaction and support. And so I think that it is important that we understand, as we continue to move forward through this pandemic, and understand what we have to have, not just the physical well-being, but the emotional and the mental well-being, I think is critically important. To your comment, there are certain things that we absolutely can't do from home, and we need to figure out how to do things in a very safe manner, which I believe that Michelin has done an incredible job overall. It's not just US 5, it's not just the Lexington campus, it is really and truly Michelin globally, because we've been dealing with it in Europe, in Asia, as well as in North and South America. So we've learned a lot from everybody else. The intent, however, is to make sure that when we come together, we're using that time to the best of our ability. Problem solving, as the Lieutenant Governor said. The last thing that I will just throw out there is, I believe that